again, and welcome to the Marty Heiser Show. You know, it's 2012, and it's going to be a political year. So here on the Marty Heiser Show, it's not all about the Danbury Whaler hockey team, and it's not all about Christian motorcycle gangs, although we're going to have some of that. We're going to have a pro-life priest who's going to be coming in talking about that. And by the way, speaking of the Catholic Church, it would seem that once again our beloved President Barack Obama has stepped in it, this time taking on the Catholic Church and all its fine hospitals and institutions and dictating to this church exactly what they can and cannot sell or do, or what type of health programs they're able to put forward. And this, I think, is a big mistake politically. I almost feel like not saying anything. Let them take on the Catholic Church and see how that works out for them. Here in Connecticut, that happened a couple of years ago where some legislatures up there, I think they came out of Darien actually, they thought it'd be a good idea for the government to take over the finances of each diocese in the state, because the government, of course, has done such a wonderful job with controlling budgets and spending and so forth. They had over 3,000 people protest at the state capitol, and it was quickly overturned. I think we're going to see the same reaction from the Catholic Church in the imposition of Obamacare into the as it went by with this whole Obamacare thing. We didn't want it. We don't want the government taking over 20% of the economy, and we're just beginning to see some of the problems. Nancy Pelosi says we need to pass this bill so we can find out what's in it. Well, guess what? It was passed in the dark of night. It was shoved down our throats, and we're beginning to see what's in it. And at least for the Catholics, at least for now, they're not liking it. And I think it's a really bad idea for the government to control 20% of the economy and dictate to you and to me how our health care will be managed going forward. So we're just beginning to see that. On something completely unrelated, Tiger Woods is playing in a golf tournament. He's playing in the Pro-Am at Pebble Beach, and he's doing pretty good. He's playing with Tony Romo. Tony Romo has a lot of time on his hands because Dallas doesn't make it into the playoffs too often, so he got a pretty good golf game. But it's good to see Tiger Woods out there playing, and he's playing well. If you've ever been to Pebble Beach, it's a beautiful place. Now, tonight's show it's action-packed. I'm going to start with a gentleman named Dick Wieland, who for some reason has thrown his hat into the ring, and you're running in the 4th Congressional District, and you're looking to take on Jim Heim. Mr. Wieland, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you very much. Right.
First question.
First question.
What were you drinking and that you decided it was going to be a good idea to throw your hat in the ring and run for political office? Go ahead.
Well, most of my drinking is clear water.
Clear water, a teetotaler.
Teetotaler, pretty much a teetotaler.
Okay.
However, once in a while I have a beer, and I don't want to name a brand, but I like the light stuff, not the real dark stuff.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
the occasional Corona.
No,
right.
yeah, exactly right. But back to your question. Why would one decide to do this, especially when you think about it? I'm a retired businessman fundamentally,
right,
but not a retired citizen.
Okay.
So now I find myself in the citizen arena, and I'm vitally concerned. When I got out of college, I could find a job.
Yeah.
In fact, several job offers. I could find work. I chose to go into certain aerospace defense industry. I could make a living, and I turned out relatively successful in my life.
What, relatively
now,
successful?
Yeah,
you had a company called Doc Sol, and you sold it for countless millions of dollars. You had an incredible, you lived the American dream.
Yeah. Exactly right. Exactly my point is why I decided to run. There is an American dream, but it requires the fact that we need to be able to provide opportunities for our young people. And the current administration, supported by his minions, one of which is Jim Hines, is there's no jobs, there's no opportunities for people out there. So I threw my hat in the ring. I want to run because I think I can bend the curve. I think I can bend the curve and get it going back towards the opportunity of an economy where people have work, where you can be successful, and where you can walk away with this feeling very good about your life.
This is live television. We have a call-in number, 438-2003. And caller, do you have a question for our candidate?
Yes. I'd like to ask Mr. Whelan, what is it about his past work experience that makes him qualified to be a congressman?
Excellent question. And by the way, do you live in the 4th Congressional District?
Yes.
And if you had a chance to vote for Mr. Whelan versus, I think his name is Jim Himes, who would you vote for?
Well, Mr. Whelan.
Okay, all right. Thanks for the question. What about that? What about your background do you think, makes you qualified to run for Congress?
Sure. Excellent. I've always been in the aerospace defense business and worked for the top firms in the United States. I've worked for Litton Industries, United Technologies here in Connecticut,
Right.
Hughes Aircraft Company, Texas Instruments, and Raytheon.
Wow.
The last
A lot of Defense Department dollars
defense,
going
well,
on those
aerospace
ways.
and electronics too. They're defense, but it's aerospace. And
Okay.
It's high tech. It's really high tech.
Right.
Quite frankly, it's high tech. But however, the last 15 years, I was in their headquarters in Washington D.C. in the Government Relations Department. So in that, we were going to talk to senators, we talked to representatives, we talked to the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, various three-letter agencies up and down all the Washington spectrum to determine what type of legislature and what type of government and what type of regulations are put in place that enhances private industry so that we can create jobs, so that we can make exports and do international economy. And so when I looked at that, I had walked the main streets,
Right.
the side streets,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
on-ramps, the off-ramps, the federally funded Research and Development Corporation. I
Right.
have been up and down Washington for 15 years.
Okay.
I know how the place works.
So you know where the skeletons are buried.
Well,
Caller,
I know.
do you have a question for the candidate?
I have a question for Mr. Whelan, yes.
Go right ahead.
How do you intend to create meaningful jobs?
Wow, good question. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. What about that? You say you know where the skeletons are buried. You know your way around Washington. You're not going to go in there and be
I'm not going
overwhelmed
down there
by the marble.
for a training session. I'm going down there to hit the road running.
Okay, and how do to the caller's question, what are you going to do to bring about meaningful jobs? What's your plan?
Well, the plan is pretty straightforward. Meaningful jobs are created by private industry. I mean, hiring public workers is taking people and giving them jobs, and that's good. But the net result is that's taxpayer funding just going to public thing, and that's fine. But what we need is private industry to create jobs.
Right.
So when I created my company, I had worked in Washington, and I saw an unmet requirement. You just look around, you're working with people, and you say, geez, why isn't this in place? There's a requirement for this.
Right.
You reach in your pocket, you take out $20,000 or $50,000, and you think about a solution, and you put it in place.
Right.
So that's how you create jobs.
Whoa. You take your own money.
You take your own money.
And you put it at risk.
You put it at
to
risk.
build a company that provides jobs.
Marty,
for
that's
people
absolutely correct. You have to do that.
See, you've been duped.
Yes.
The way that you create a business now is you bundle donations for a certain candidate. When he gets into office, he gives you $500,000. You call the company Cylindra, and then you produce you have $500 million, and you produce a factory that creates solar cells that you can sell for $6 a piece.
Incredible. And that's because we have a gentleman that doesn't know how to create meaningful private industry jobs. He just doesn't know how to do it. And the people that vote for him and support him and are in the political bloc, they seem to have the same problem. They really seem to have the problem. They don't see how it can be done.
Yeah, I was watching on the news just the other day. Everyone wants to have an electric car. Everyone wants to have a flying car. Everyone wants to have solar panels everywhere that's going to run everything from our waffle maker to jet engines. Some of this stuff just can't be done. And basically, if you take $500 million of taxpayers' money, you can build a nice factory.
Well,
you can hire some people for a while, but pretty soon they're out of work.
Inherently, green energy and energy sources are not bad. It's the undertaking they have. It's the execution of trying to get that goes bad. It starts out with bad management. Starts out with a bad idea. You build a bad company, it goes broke.
Yeah.
You can't manage things that are not going to be a success.
The free market. Adam Smith had it right. That hidden hand is a bitch, isn't
You,
it?
tell me about it. I have to make paychecks when I'm taking it out of my
So you met
taking out of my my own
All right,
account.
caller, do you have a question for our clear-thinking, conservative Republican candidate? What are your thoughts, dear caller?
Hey, Marty, it's Larry. Good evening.
Good to hear
I
you
do
from you.
Thank you. I do have a question for Mr. Wheeland, and it's not necessarily an economic question, but it relates to your original discussion at the start of the show. You're making mention of the president's decision to make Catholic hospitals provide certain services that they think are not going.
Are
or
you,
not
like me,
keeping with the
outraged
faith.
at the infringement of the separation in church and state?
Well, I have a question for you, and it's for Mr. Whelan. Sometime after the passage of the First Amendment, I don't know exactly when it was in maybe the 1830s or the 1840s, there was a religious group in Massachusetts that engaged in religious sacrifice, human sacrifice, excuse me. And they actually won a case in Massachusetts Supreme Court that allowed them to kill a member. The case went to the United States Supreme Court, and they said no, that there are limitations upon freedom of religion. Just so I'm clear, I'm not comparing murder
You're not
to being
making
against
reference to
abortion. But the point I want to make is there a time where a government feels they have a right, a moral obligation to, as you might call it, infringe upon the actions of a religious group? And that's the question I have to Mr. Wheeler.
All right, excellent question. Thanks a lot, Larry, and we'll see you in here soon. What about that? Does the government, I mean, I know you're a free enterprise guy, you don't want the government infringing, but is there, I mean, in a case...
Well, I wouldn't hold it just to a religious group. I don't think the government has a particular right to interfere with the free thinking and freedom of an individual. We'll just go, for instance, to Obamacare. Do they have the right to mandate the fact that you buy insurance or I'm going to fine you?
Yeah.
They don't have that right. Like at least one judge says the government has the right to make you eat broccoli. Do they have the right to do what they're doing to the Catholic Church at this time, the doctrine of the Catholic Church? I don't think they have that right. I really don't think they have that right. I think they're pushing way too far on those type of issues, quite frankly.
Let's talk politics for a second here.
Yeah.
You say you've been around Washington, so you know what's going on there, but at the same time, you built a company, and is it okay to say, I mean, you built this company into a $25 million company, so this is something that you're not an amateur at this.
No.
And you know what it means to provide a good and service in the marketplace and meet a payroll.
But that was just my own company. Years before that, I worked for Texas Instrument, United Technologies, and I learned how to make big companies. I mean, 25 million, that's what my company went for. But we're talking about companies that are 8, 9, 10, 30 billion. Right. You have to be able to understand how those organizations work and how the government impacts their business. And that's part of the thing that is important to me. You need to know it all the way.
When did you, I mean, the Apostle Paul was on a horse to Damascus, and he was knocked off his horse by a bolt of lightning, and I heard a voice from heaven and said, you know, why are you persecuting me? When did you get knocked off your horse? When did you have that aha moment that said, doggone it, I can't stand it anymore. Someone's got to do something, and if no one else is going to, I'm throwing my hat in the ring. You don't seem like a guy that needs the money. You don't seem like a guy that needs the grief. You seem like you don't have a lot of ego involvement in this, but what made you decide?
I'm not trying to be a movie star. I don't want to write a book. And yeah, you're right. I'm not. I know where my next meal is coming from. But I have a family. I have grandchildren. And I see people, my friends, my neighbors, all around me. They don't have the opportunity that I had. And it's the opportunity situation is being taken away from this country by the administration that we're having down there, and they're veering off in that path. It's going the wrong way. So that's the seminal decision for me. I know the country is headed in the incorrect position. Now, 1 out of 435 congressmen are not going to be able to turn it up, but 1 and then 2 and then 5, we go to 430. We get our numbers up, we can have a very important effect on the direction of the country. And that's sort of a 40,000 foot. There's a whole bunch of little details, but the big deal is, in my mind, the country is heading in the wrong direction. That's about it.
We had a little cartoon. It was actually a video, sort of it was a video with a message, and it was basically this guy walking in to see his banker. It's viral on the internet if you see it. Walking in to see his banker, and he's saying, I think I need to raise my debt ceiling. And the banker says, well, you know, you owe all this money, you know, you owe $15 million, and you're not able to pay it back. Have you thought about cutting back? And he said, oh, yes, banker, we cut $300 out of our $15 million budget. Oh, it was terrible, it was terrible. And the banker finally said, well, we're not going to raise your credit limit, that's it, and I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. Have you thought of anything else? And he said, well, what about the kids? And then the banker said, the kids? Wait, you have children? And they usher the kids in, they give them a crayon, and the kids sign off on the banknote. And they said, and that's essentially what I hear you saying we're doing to our kids. We're spending money at $1 trillion. Yeah, if we can get a close-up of this. I don't know if we have, Frank, if we can get a close-up of this. Go ahead. Explain what we're looking at here. Go ahead.
This is some of the work I used to do in Washington when I was down there, is try to analyze the federal budget, where the expenditures were going, the expenditures, and you know, and what type of situation. Now, across the top here, I've listed gross domestic product and our deficit.
Okay.
We now cross the line. Our deficit is greater than gross domestic product. Now, can anybody spell Greece? Yeah. It's spelled just like U.S. now. We're going right down that path. We are right in the group of people who are spending more than they can. So that's on here. That's bad news. I have a couple little just tiny arrows. I like to pass these things out, and I'm not going to show it. So, but I've shown on here what the grand bargain would have done in terms of tax increases. Just a little net, like you say, $300.
Right.
And now here,
well, when you talk to people, you'd think we were throwing teachers out of schools. Kids weren't going to get their next meal. It was going to be a disaster.
Sequester and all that stuff. That's just tiny little stuff. That's politicking coming out of Washington. The real problem is revenues are down here and spending is up. And these revenues went down because of the economy. They didn't stop spending. And down here at the little bottom is Obamacare, and that's just beginning to grow.
And that's going to be the next one.
And that's a nightmare. That is a nightmare. We're going through the roof on debt and spending. So there's a lot of push points to get into this game.
All right. Dick Wieland, they have your website up there if people want to get in touch with you. Actually, basically, just go to Google Richard Wieland, 4th Congressional District. If they have a website up there, how can they get in touch with you?
www.wieland 2012, making it simple.
2012? Wieland.2012.com.
Or they can look, and give me a call. I give you my cell phone number at 202, that's a Washington Exchange.
Okay.
I have it down there, 202-210-4728. Call me. Please call me.
All right.
I'm happy to talk about this.
Well, listen, I'm going to vote for you. I think you're going to be great.
Thank you, Mr. Heiser.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I think if we have more civic-minded people like you that finally said, hey, enough is enough, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, I think we'd be a lot better off.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for coming in. Now, we're going to have if we can keep it right here, what we're going to do is we're going to cut to, and we're going to come back in just a minute as they get ready with their public service announcement. We're going to be joined shortly by Tony Boucher, State Senator Tony Boucher from the 26th Senate District. And she's going to be telling us what's going on in Hartford and also what we can expect coming out of the legislative session that they're going in right now. I know she has a lot to say about education in Connecticut. Connecticut historically has been at the top of the heap when it comes to education, but it's slipping a little bit, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. And she's going to be talking quite a bit about the transportation network, that Route 7 corridor, and the need for mass transit and what we can do about that. But one thing about Tony Boucher is she always has something on her mind. And so what we're going to do right now, we're going to go to the public service announcement, and we'll be right back with State Senator Tony Boucher, so don't go anywhere. Thank you.
there are no extras, no fluff, no frills, no free lunch, no second helpings, no streets paved with gold, no promise, no certainty. In this state, life is a bitter struggle to survive with the least. It's home to 1 out of every 11 families in America. It's home to 1 out of every 6 children in America. It's home to more than 32 million people. It's the state of American poverty. And if you were poor, you'd be home by now.
Why is it you two have so much trouble communicating?
I don't like the way he talks to me. He doesn't have to use that kind of language.
All I said was that you had a big osteo fight. Oh, okay, well, what about the secrets you kept from me?
Oh, so I didn't tell you about my drug allergies. Big deal.
That could have been nasty.
Ooh. Okay. So how come I always have to go to your place?
I'd be happy to come to you, Judith. I can't fit the x-ray machine in my car. How's your shoulder doing, anyway?
Fine.
Yeah?
I worked up to 3-pound dumbbells yesterday.
Really? Huh. Just 3 weeks after surgery. That's pretty good.
Yeah?
Communication is the best medicine. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
Well, now we're getting somewhere. Group hug.
Welcome back to the Marty Heiser Show, man. Every time I see those Marines, I think I'm just happy they're on our side. We are joined by probably the most powerful Republican in the state of Connecticut. I've done the math on that, but State Senator Tony Boucher.
Marty, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for coming in. Now, you wouldn't dream it, but did you just have a grandchild? Is that true?
My proudest moment.
Because I don't think you're old enough to have a grandchild, but what's the story there?
December 21st, we had a little grandson. His name is Isaac, and my nickname for him is Ike. And instead of a cigar, everybody gets an I like Ike button.
I know. You gave one of those to my wife. She wears it around the house. It's just an exciting time. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
I mean, I saw a pillow once that said, if I knew how good grandkids was, I would have had them first. Something like that.
It's our reward for suffering through parenthood.
I think, okay, well, I'm still waiting for my reward. None of my kids are married yet, so let's do this chronologically right.
All right.
Okay, Tony, you're up there. You're having a session now in Hartford.
Yep.
There's a lot of issues. I saw a video about you where you're talking about education.
Yes.
But overall, there's a problem with spending. Let me just give you just a brief interlude, and then you take it. We were told that we were going to have this new Democratic governor, that he was going to come in and he was going to control spending, and he knew the unions, and he was going to get them to come to the bargaining table and come up with reasonable spending plan. So we're going to have to raise revenues, and that means taxes. So anytime a politician talks about revenues, hold on to your wallet. So, okay, we're going to have to raise revenues, but don't worry, we're going to cut spending. We're going to put this all in balance. What really happened?
Well, many of us are very disturbed about the largest tax increase in the state's history last session when we did propose an alternative. There was an alternative on the table that could have been implemented line item by line item that did not include these tax increases, but it did reduce spending. What did happen, you're absolutely right, Connecticut continued to spend where other states curtail their spending during one of the worst recessions that we've known in modern history in the last 60 years. So Connecticut continued to spend at the same rate, 5%, and in fact...
5% increase?
5% increase, and in fact, there's an additional increase in the next year as well. So this large tax increase was going to take care of any shortfall we would have.
Right.
And many were predicting surpluses. Right now, we do no longer have a surplus. In other words, the revenue estimates were quite inflated, overestimated. And certainly we were concerned about this, and that is what has happened. Not only are we not in a balanced budget situation. We're facing a shortfall, so there's rescissions that this governor is going to have to take, some serious rescissions. unless there's another tax increase afoot, which I don't think the public would tolerate.
When you say
rescissions,
that
meaning
means they're going to have to cut the budget midstream. Is that what we're saying?
In some places, but on the other hand, there's a lot of spending that's going on, tremendous amounts of new bonding, and not to mention this new proposal for educational excellence and reform, which I'm, by the way, highly supportive. What I'd like for him to do now is reappropriate funds that are currently in other departments and put it up against this $130 million in new spending for education reform. What concerns me is the out years, and even the administration agrees that we have a serious, serious deficit problem in the years 2014, 2015, and 2016. $650 million in shortfall budget deficits in 2014, $1.1 billion in shortfall in 2015, and $1.3 billion shortfall. This has got to be addressed, and it has to be addressed now, because otherwise that just will balloon out. Now, having been saying that, being disturbed about that budgetary session that we have, I'm looking with greater optimism at this session, because as the governor has proclaimed, it's going to be the session about education reform. And you know that's the reason I first got involved in public service. My local Board of Ed, State Board of Education, the Education Committee while I was in the House, and now as a leader in the Education Committee and Higher Education Committee in the State Senate on our side of the aisle. So many of the proposals that are on the table, in fact, I just finished reading this afternoon the 165 pages worth of this omnibus bill that's going to address some pretty important subjects. Connecticut used to be #1 in the nation for education in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, and people used to call me from other states and say, what are you doing that's so great in Connecticut? We'd like to follow suit. Well, while the rest of the nation started to improve and do the reforms necessary, Connecticut really pretty much went flat and flatlined it for right now. So the important steps that have to be taken to bring us back to a top-of-the-nation stature are now being put on the table. And this is going to rock some people's boats. Let's face it, teacher tenure, teacher evaluation, the
it seems like
reconstruction of schools.
Anytime you try to look at some of those things like tenure and so forth, all of a sudden you're branded as anti-education, and you don't care. You don't care about teachers or something like that. It seems like the teachers union is pretty powerful, and they come out strong if you do anything that would curtail maybe some of their benefits and some of those other things. By the way, the phone number here is 438-2003. It's right there. It's live television. If you'd like to, if you have a question for the state senator, please don't hesitate to call in. And we may be having a caller call in, former Congressman Chris Shays, who's going to be running for Senate, maybe calling in later. He's going to be on the show on March 1st as well. Let me just, before we get into education, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. Connecticut doesn't have a tax problem. We're not taxing too little, we're spending too much. I mean, I'm a simple man, I have a simple mind, I like things that are presented to me that make sense. One is this concept of the Tax Freedom Day, which is how many days of the year do you have to work to pay your federal, state, and local taxes. And you have 50 states in the union, and there's one that's consistently the highest one in the union, and that's Connecticut. You have to work every day through January, February, March, and up to April 29th to pay your state, federal taxes in Connecticut. So you have to work
the longest in Connecticut to finally become free of your taxes. And national headlines proclaim this. They proclaim that Connecticut is the highest combined tax burden state. It is the highest indebtedness per person state, and we're also the worst state in the country to retire. So we can't go there. We can't go towards taxing more to accomplish some of these goals. We have to reappropriate, and we have to start spending at that same rate. Those concessions, by the way, did not produce the kind of savings that were originally anticipated. We still have the most generous package for our public employees than practically any other state. So that's an issue there. But going back to the a place where we can get bipartisan support is on education reform, because it is one of our last competitive advantages actually for our state.
I'm a little nervous when you start talking about education reform that this is all just going to cost more money, and they're coming up with policies where in the end, if you really care, you care about education, it's so important, let's just throw more money at it. When I see what the parochial schools have done with the amount per pupil that they pay, and the the response that they get as a result of that, I think they do a lot better job than the public schools. Hold on one second. Caller, do you have a question for the senator?
Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year to you, too. How are you?
And congratulations on the birth of your grandson. Is that right?
That's right. Thank you so much. We're absolutely delighted.
You know, this whole political stuff, when it comes right down to it, if you can go home and get a hug from your grandkid, it seems to make it all, you know, all the other things worthwhile. Yeah.
Yes.
So what's your question for the senator?
I just want to say I met the senator before, and she's a really smart person. I really appreciate that. She really lets people know what's going on in Hartford. But listen, you know that the governor's first two priorities are budget and jobs, and that's always been the case. But he's getting hit. He's getting hit with the state police deal. He wants to cut the number of state police, and the state police now understand the thing about suing him. But there are some things that should be up in discussion. With the busway, that busway running from Hartford to New Britain, you know, that's a very expensive project. And, you know, you might be able to do something better, getting maybe a monorail system in there that's paid for by the federal government. So there's definitely some issues, but, you know, I think the governor really has good ideas. And you guys, the Democrats and Republicans and the Independents have to work together on these matters because, you know, at the end of the day, we're all Americans. Well, anyway, listen, I'm going to hang up and great show. Thank you.
All right, thanks for calling in.
His comments are right on point. We actually did work together for a bipartisan jobs bill that got practically everybody on board in the fall. And it included, by the way, the reason it passed. You know why? Because it included Republican proposals and Democratic proposals.
Kumbaya, my Lord. Did you guys embrace like that around the Capitol? Kumbaya?
Almost. You know, a little bit different from what's going on in D.C. Yeah. And I also anticipate we're also going to have a very bipartisan education session as well, because those two things, jobs and education, are on everybody's mind. I think that in this case, because some of these proposals are so controversial, the Republicans are going to be really relevant in this discussion, and there's going to be a need to have both sides on board to counteract exactly what you pointed out. There's strong lobbying against some of these types of reforms. We tried to pass them last year. In fact, I even passed a bill that talked about evaluating teachers and it based on student achievement and growth, and it made it out of committee, but it never made it passed on the floor of the House or Senate. This year, however, that whole proposal is front and center, and there are many other proposals. The takeover of 20 to 25 failing schools, persistently failing schools.
Now, who would take that over? The state of Connecticut or the federal government?
The commissioner on the state of Connecticut, the Department of Education, would either take it over themselves or have a private, not necessarily private, but a charter school organization, a nonprofit, would be employed if they have a good track record and can show that they actually can get results.
Have you seen that documentary, Waiting for Superman?
Yes. And
what was your reaction to that?
Well, you know, there's a great deal of truth to that, and it is a big concern. That is why part of the proposals here give a lot more support, financial support, to public charter schools that are having a positive effect in the most difficult circumstances.
If you haven't seen this this documentary, it's called Waiting for Superman. All of you have Netflix accounts or whatever. Go to that and you can see Waiting for Superman. Watch this show. It's very fascinating. Basically, it talks about the public sector school system and how it's a monopoly by the teachers unions, and they have such draconian rules that you really can't get anything done. If there's a teacher that isn't been performing and they have tenure, they're there to stay. And it's the kids. It's the kids at the end of the day. It's interesting when you look at it because the documentarian that put that together actually put together for Al Gore, the documentary on global warming, which I also think is a bit of a hoax as well. But don't get me started on that. But this was a liberal documentarian working for Al Gore. So this isn't some sort of right-wing wacko coming in there and hammering the poor teachers. He came in and he made the mistake of getting married and have children and sending these children, his own precious little children, off into the school system, and he saw how dysfunctional it was, and he, you know, rolled up his sleeves and tried to get to the bottom of it. And what he found is that the teachers unions that are controlling all these tenure and everything else and protecting their pensions and protecting, I mean, these teacher unions are some of the toughest unions you're ever going to have to negotiate with, And they're doing all that to the detriment of the children. And hopefully this reform may be addressing
Well, almost every...
I don't want to mess it up for you for the teachers union, because everyone's got to vote for her.
No.
But I'm just telling it like it is.
Let me tell you, the teachers have come together on this, particularly the evaluation changes that we're looking at that will be a part of this reform package. And in fact, almost every one of the issues that you've pointed out are mentioned and dealt with in a very serious way in this legislative package. Now, the danger, as you said, is it going to get watered down? It was last year, so it didn't pass. This year, however, I think all of the stars are aligned to get this to move forward. And I think that they have been involved in the evaluation piece of this, because that evaluation piece is going to affect their tenure, the capability to get tenure, and it's going to be more flexible, and it won't be for life. It will be renewable, which is really quite extraordinary. And that tenure and evaluation piece will also play into whether leaders and principals get to keep their jobs as well, or they will have a shorter span between the time that they get a negative evaluation to the time when they're placed out. And so hopefully we will no longer have the situation that we had last year, which was unconscionable. Our Teacher of the Year for the state of Connecticut was junior to others and had to be laid off because of budgetary considerations. And that's
so you have a wonderful teacher,
wrong, right?
And there's no merit pay. There's no like, well, we need to, you know.
Extra pay is in this package. Almost everything you can think of. This is an extraordinary proposal. It is addressing almost everything. Preschool slots for disadvantaged kids, 500 more slots.
School vouchers?
It's
okay to say no.
The ability for parents to choose within a range of public schools, charter schools, magnet schools, compact schools, and so they will be able to actually access the school of that they would like to see that is performing the best.
Right.
There's a great deal more financial support for charter schools that are performing well, so the state is going to give them more money. In addition to that, there's going to be more money for master teachers. Let's put teachers on a career path for excellence and be rewarded for that good performance. Many of the teachers themselves will be the peer reviewers and part of that evaluation process for this new model. And in there will be a 4-point system. And that 4-point system is that you're needing help, or you're developing better.
This is for a teacher?
This is for a teacher that is not proficient. You're not proficient. And then there's one where you're developing. There's one where you are proficient, and then you're an exemplary teacher. If you get the top 2 ratings 3 years in a row, there's a faster route to tenure. And if you and you also will have 5 years to get there. But if you don't get there, then it's possible that you might not proceed in your profession. And by the way, that tenure is not for life. It's no longer for life. So there's a lot to be done here, and I think that the unions do see that the writing's on the wall this year, so they're coming to the table to be a part of this process. I'm also reaching out to our teachers and our teachers union to discuss this bill, to get their input, and there will be much opportunity for them to come to public hearings. But I'm just as concerned about this being watered down, and the governor has stated his credibility. He is thrown down the gauntlet, and if it's watered down, you can bet there will be individuals like myself that are going to be out there to make sure that
stake his credibility on the fact that he was going to be able to get concessions from these state unions and so forth, and that didn't really work out so well. So all this posturing and I'm staking my reputation that we're going to do this, it seems to me taxes are continuing to go up, spending is continuing to go up even faster. Connecticut's becoming less and less attractive to businesses. Businesses are moving out as quickly as they possibly can. I mean, we had Dick Whelan, who's running for Congress, and he worked for United Technologies. I think when they were looking at expanding, they said anywhere but Connecticut because of the burdens of regulation and taxations. And I think that's one thing that the state of Connecticut and those in Hartford need to understand, is that it's a very transient business community right now. It's not like, hey, well, we put bricks and mortars down in Connecticut, so we really got to stay there no matter what they do. They can move in a heartbeat.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, they're looking
they're much more mobile. And you know what? And you've raised an excellent point. There have been some proposals on the table by the administration to really give special incentives to large businesses with many employees. However, you know this yourself, 80% of our business sector in Connecticut are small business. And those small businesses are the most affected by these taxes that were increased. So as I said, even though they would like for us to send a message out that we're open for business, the bottom line is that structurally we still are a high-cost state. You're absolutely right. We didn't get the concessions that were originally thought to be negotiated. And by the the way, some of these very lucrative and generous packages are now extended for 11 years. So it ties the hands, as other administrations have done the same. So we have an issue there with regards to the cost structure. However, it appears that there's a movement towards addressing some of the concerns that we pointed out last year. And definitely a desire to make these serious education reform to actually be implemented this year against, as you said, very strong special interest groups. But I'm very optimistic that those reforms will happen. I'm less optimistic about the fiscal discipline that's required. And that's where the cold water could be thrown on a lot of these very positive things. You were right to point out there's about a $50 million expenditure for some of these things, particularly to reward teachers, particularly to recruit people into teaching
Jack Welch, who was, head of GE, had this thing, Six Circle. What was that called?
Six Sigma.
Six Sigma.
Yes.
And the idea is, okay,
Quality.
But the low-end guys, you give them a week or two to buck up, and if they don't buck up, they're hitting the bricks. I doubt you're going to get that kind of concession from the teachers.
Well, let me tell you, you're right. It's in the package, where in the past it would take 75 days and all kinds of hearing times and testimony. This shortens it to 30 days with 8-hour maximum for a hearing for the outplacements, as you said. So they've tried to shrink that time it takes to make changes, significant changes, and it's also making changes, by the way, on union contracts in those failing schools. If the state has to take it over, or another organization has to run that school, they literally will restrict any binding arbitration subjects to just salaries and time off. And all the other workplace issues now no longer apply. And that's one of the things that you pointed out that's exactly right.
Well, you said, I watched your little video presentation from the Capitol talking about education. You said that Connecticut used to be the top-rated education state.
It was.
Have we slipped, or where are we at? I mean, we're still ahead of Arkansas,
It was
aren't we?
one of the things that I prided Connecticut on. I have to say, as a local Board of Education member, as a state Board of Education member, in those early years when we were
Taxes
number one.
might be pretty high, but doggone it, we're really smart here.
It was our competitive
and we got Yale,
advantage.
And your kids will be well scrubbed and educated at the end of it all. And we're not Arkansas.
Well,
so
we
come
slipped.
to Connecticut.
We've slipped.
We're still ahead of Arkansas, though. Right?
We've slipped. We were number one in the late 90s and the early 2000s. We've slipped down to 19, which is not good at all in my view. And that's why some serious steps.
The state?
Exactly.
Wow.
And so I think this is why it's an economic imperative. And we're at a position where, I think it's at a crisis moment. Our demographics has changed dramatically in our cities, particularly in our failing school systems. Those persistently failing schools, it's like a bankruptcy. Okay, when the city of Waterbury went bankrupt, guess what happened? All those union contracts had to be ripped up and start over again. Well, these persistently failing schools, I would maintain, it's a bankruptcy situation. So the rules don't apply, and they have to do everything and anything to bring those educational systems back up to par, because we're failing kids. And when we fail kids, we're failing our economy.
Yeah. Caller, you have a question for the senator?
Yes. One thing I did forget, Senator, and you know more about this than I do, but maybe you might want to explain to the viewers. If there is a balanced budget amendment in the state constitution, how come it's not being adhered to, and further on up the road, God willing? Thank you.
Yeah, what about that? Does Connecticut have any form of currency, like a Connecticut dollar or a shekel or a pence, that they can just print more money, or do you actually have to have a balanced budget?
Connecticut, along with the vast majority of every state in the country, have a requirement to have a balanced budget. The public did vote 80% in favor of a constitutional amendment to put that in place.
Right.
That was never ratified by the General Assembly, but in lieu of that, they passed legislation, and it is the law of the state, in fact, that we have to have a balanced budget. At the time when this budget was enacted, given the revenue estimates they were predicting, they predicted a balanced budget. Those revenue estimates did not come to pass or didn't hold up. However, it changes on a month-to-month basis, and it's swinging wildly of either $100 million in surplus, and the next month it's $100 million, right now $140 million in deficit. So they're predicting that by the end, the governor has committed that by the end of June, the end of our fiscal year, that we will be in balance. If we're in danger of not being in balance, he's committed to cutting back in various departments. They've already gotten their marching orders on that. So I'm I'm hoping that that's the case. Now, to pay for this educational reform package, if we do it all and we give incentives for the best students to go into teacher preparation courses so we get better teachers in the classroom, and we're going to give them a scholarship or pay off their loans, or if we're going to do another program where we're going to pay preschool teachers more and make sure they get accredited, or we're going to pay master teachers more, or we're going to pay teachers to go into the inner city, into our worst schools and get our best teachers there. If we're going to pay for all that, then that money cannot come from the public and for more taxes. It has to come from that rescissionary capability to reduce costs.
What is rescissionary capability?
It means it reduces.
You're going to cut? Is that what you're saying?
That's cut. So it has to cut
okay, so
in other
revenues means we're raising your taxes.
But you can
rescissionary means we're going to cut.
Correct. Okay, and so what you do is you reduce the spending in a particular department, say the Department of Social Services, or the Department of Revenue Services, or the Department of Economic and Community Development, and you reappropriate those funds and put them into your education reform package and create efficiencies in places where you can find some.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you, there's the public sector and there's the private sector. I have very little confidence in the public sector cutting anything. I have very little confidence when you pull back the profit incentive, where, you know, your bonus or your ability to hold on to your job is determined on how profitably you run your division, or how much you get more sales, or you can't just endlessly raise taxes. I just have a lot more faith in the private sector as far as holding down costs on that.
You're absolutely correct.
We just have an illustrious person calling in. It's Al Robinson, the publisher. Do you publish blogs, or you just kind of type them out?
I write op-eds every week. Every week I'm typing. My problem is that I write too much, and I need to pare it down to a blog form.
Well, speaking of blogging a bit too much with graphics and everything else, here's a man who spends many hours in his basement in his pajamas plucking away. Al Robinson, thank you so much for joining us, and we have the senator here. What's on your mind?
One quick point and then one question for the senator. Number one, as somebody who wants to become a teacher, and I know I have a lot of friends who are teachers. Teachers are on the front lines when it comes to education. They're the people who are working their tails off, finding ways with limited resources to teach kids. And I just think that we need to be a little careful in pointing to, you know, what's the cause of the education problem. It's not necessarily the teachers. It's more of the administrators and the bad policies from the administrators that are giving you a lot of the problems. So teachers take a bad rap, and I encourage anybody to go to an inner city school and watch teachers do their work and have a better appreciation of what they go through on a day-to-day basis. My other question to the senator is, Senator, you represent a lot of board communities. I want to get your opinion on Sunday liquor sales. And if you are against Sunday sales, why is it the government's prerogative to protect mom-and-pop businesses as opposed to just letting the free market enterprise dictate for itself if a mom-and-pop place is to stay alive or not? Well, what's more important, preserving the mom-and-pop stores, or giving me the right to choose when I want to buy my alcohol as an adult? Thanks.
All right, that's Al Robinson, Hat City Blog, Hat City Blog. Go there and you can see funny pictures of Mayor Bowden. Who doesn't like those pictures?
But
so you want to go.
I love hearing from our
Al Robinson,
Hat City blogger for sure. And let me tell you something. Both of those questions, by the way, are excellent. The first one having to do with teachers that work hard in inner city schools particularly, and the administrative challenges that they have. I know this personally from members of my own family that are teaching right now in the Bronx and have that very same issue. There is no question that he is absolutely right. Most teachers want to work in a building and a school that is highly functional and has a great reputation. And they know which peers are doing a great job and those that are literally taking their tenure and not putting in any effort anymore, or don't have the inspiration anymore for their profession. So it's quite clear. That's why it's important to have teachers be involved in a peer evaluation process so it's more fair. And absolutely right, the kind of environment that it takes to teach in a very difficult school environment can be seen. However, we also have seen where charter schools have created a wonderful school environment for their teachers and for their kids, and it's leadership at the top is critical, and why some of this reform is directed at leadership and principles. And they are going to be really scrutinized and analyzed in much the same way that we will do it for the rest of the profession. Number two, the second question about Sunday sales.
Sunday liquor sales.
Sunday
for
liquor
gosh
sales.
sakes.
Well,
I mean,
you know, a lot of...
if we're not as smart as we used to be, at least we can buy liquor on Sundays and, you know, kind of anesthetize ourselves to our ignorance.
Well, I have been talking, and in our district and 7 towns, we have a lot of small mom-and-pop liquor stores.
And they're against this.
Well, they are because, you know, most of them are single proprietors.
Yeah.
They work 6 days a week.
Yeah.
They'll work 8 to 10 or to 12 hours, and Sunday is usually their day off.
So we got liquor stores that just don't want to be bothered to sell liquor on potentially the most profitable day of the week?
No, not bothered at all. It's that the larger chain stores are open 7 days a week already, so they already have staff in place. So it's
but they put that big canvas over the Bud Light. You can't get at it. They got a big curtain over it.
It's true. Now, on the other hand, the small proprietor
so close yet so far. It's very frustrating. You know.
It's tough
Friends
for you,
are frustrated by that. I know. You know, it's like they're taunting you. Really, it's like a feather dance of beer.
Now, for the sole proprietor, to add another person on and staff when they have a smaller margin, it really cuts into also their profit. And so that means adding more staff will cut into how much they're able to bring home in the way of taking home.
So as a group, they're against this.
They are. However, some of them have said, you know...
I think they need to suck it up, hire a kid, put them in there, sell some beer on Sunday.
They tend to... their compromise position is, let them sell beer on Sunday. Okay, that leaves the liquor stores with some business.
Then we'll get to Sunday hunting, because there's nothing more you want to do after you... No, sorry.
than to go out and...
firearms and alcohol on Sunday. What could be better to enhance our state?
But on the issue, in the past...
I'm joking about
in the past, of course, I've supported our small retailers. However, I'm very open to listening to the argument. Once again, it may very well be that it's predicted to go through this year. The governor is really pushing it hard. He thinks there'll be more revenues. Others will maintain that it's just a shifting of when people buy. So it might be the same revenues. But it also makes them competitive with some of the stores on the borders to New York.
Al Robinson will tell you anecdotally that there are people slipping across state lines and buying their beverages on Sundays. Al would know better than this. I don't imbibe quite as much as Al does. Let's talk quickly. We're getting into the lightning round here. Politics, politics, politics.
Yep.
Now, a little birdie told me that you have been tapped to either run for president, governor, senator, or potentially Congress. And can you confirm or deny that you will be participating in the Republican primary slated for North and South Dakota coming up here, or is that just a vicious rumor? What is your future? Because all kidding aside, there are a lot of people that say that you are destined for higher places.
Well, I couldn't.
What's the plan?
Well, I couldn't be more flattered. This is the kind support has been really absolutely wonderful and very rewarding.
All right, Tony. Get to the point. Let's make some news here. Throw your hat in the ring right here, right now.
However, I think this is a movement, and recruiting me through the media, I think, is what has happened here. And in fact, I haven't thrown my hat in the ring other than it's highly likely I'll be running for my state Senate seat. And if there's a future in higher office, possibly in Connecticut, that might happen in the future, and it's something I might consider. But right now, I'm really focused on this
November state Senate seat.
Well, it's very likely that I'll be running for state Senate, but right now I'm so focused on the session. I have 4 committees. Most people have 3. I have 3 leadership positions on 3 of those committees: transportation, education, higher ed. I'm also on the Revenue, Finance, and Bonding Committee. So that leadership position requires that I'm there a lot, and I'm also involved in a lot of screening of the bills, particularly this year of education and running through this particular bill. I'm so focused on doing that, I haven't even put my head up to actually take a look at the surroundings on what other possibilities are there. I think that we'll look at that going into the future, but right now I'm so concentrated on Connecticut. Connecticut is the place that I grew up in. It's the place I was educated in. It's the place where I've raised my family, and I have my career here and my profession. So I'm dedicated to Connecticut and its issues.
All right, Tony. We get it. We get it. You love Connecticut. You love your governor, all that stuff. Who do you like? I mean, do you want to handicap some of these races? You got Chris Shays. You got Linda McMahon. Do you have a dog in that fight?
Well, let me tell you, I have a long Linda McMahon is a wonderful woman. She really is. I think if people get to know her personally, they will fall in love with her.
What about those videotapes of her wrestling guys in tights? Should we just get past that?
I've had a long-standing relationship, positive relationship with Congressman Christopher Shays.
Yeah.
He is someone I've supported vigorously in the past, and his constituent office has been outstanding. They've taken care of my constituents in my district, and I can depend on them on doing a good job for them. He has excellent staff.
Not so much Jim Himes, huh? I think is what you're saying.
Well, I don't think I've had that kind of special relationship and the kind of advocacy, I think, on the part of my constituents. But I'm not going to be negative.
So have you thrown your support one way or the other?
I haven't yet. Then you just interviewed someone that's thrown their hat in there as well.
Yeah.
There's and by the way, there's an interesting Afro-American gentleman, a true professional, Brian Cahill, that's running for the U.S. Senate as well. He's not to be discounted. I think you would find him very impressive.
So
what
Chris Shays,
I am
Brian
really
Cahill,
happy,
and Linda McMahon?
and in the congressional race, we have 3 or 4 outstanding individuals, one of which you've already heard. You have. We've heard. There's a
Dick
couple.
Whelan, very impressive guy.
And so is Chris Meek, and so is Steve Upsiknik from Westport.
Yeah.
So you know what? I'm really proud that our Republican Party has really brought out some of outstanding individuals with truly good character. So I'm very excited about the potential of what we're going to see, and I'm hoping that some of them break out of the pack.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just seen is a 3.5-minute non-endorsement of anyone. And I think it was beautifully well done, well done. Did not take a stand on any of them. I'm just kidding.
Not for the moment.
Not for now.
But I'm going to have a vote.
Yeah, at some point. There's a convention coming up, and you're going to throw your, you know.
I'm going to have to.
Dick Whelan's here. Maybe he can take you out for a drink after this, and he can get your vote. Listen, we really appreciate you coming in.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been
as always.
As always, I really appreciate it. And okay, I wasn't joking when I said I think you really, if you look at the landscape, I think you are the most powerful Republican in
I don't know about that.
in Connecticut.
But we need more.
Well,
you know, women. On both sides of the aisle, particularly in our Republican Party, and I'm looking forward to mentoring and growing some really good leadership in our party.
All right.
We need it.
And you have that wonderful grandchild, which is good.
It's great.
Listen, coming up, we've got some pretty interesting shows coming up. We have a group called the Sons of Abraham. Where do you get a hold of these guys? This is like ZZ Top on a motorcycle meets Billy Graham. It's a Christian leather motorcycle gang. They've got some incredible stories to tell. We also have a father from Darien, Connecticut, who's going to be coming in talking about the pro-life movement and what's going on that front. And then also we have Congressman Chris Shays. Look at that. I don't know if we can get a close-up of that. That's Congressman Chris Shays. I mean, when you think of a senator, don't you think of a guy that looks like this? Congressman Chris Shays, he spent, what, 18 years in the Congress, something like that?
I think over 20.
Over 20 years in the Congress. I think it would be great for him to move upstairs to the Senate. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week here on the Marty Heiser Show, where you always get the truth. Thanks a lot. See you next week. Bye.